Hey everyone, welcome to the Church Planting Podcast. I'm Greg Nettle and I serve as president of Stadia Church Planting, where we believe that every person on the planet deserves access to a thriving, growing, multiplying church. I'm really excited about this episode. We have special guest, my friend Suzanne Nadell, who is a major news director for an affiliate in Atlanta. She's going to be talking about leading in stressful situations. And man, has she been doing exactly that. Join us now. Welcome Suzanne Nadell to the Church Planting Podcast. So I'm really excited to have my friend Suzanne Nadell on the podcast today, the Church Planting Podcast. Suzanne, welcome to Stadia World and the Church Planting Podcast.
Oh, well, thank you. Good to be here.
Suzanne, I love speaking with business leaders, and I especially love it that you're a female business leader. And not just that, you're high capacity, we're going to talk about working in high pressure situations, and you do that pretty much every day. Give us just a snapshot of your life right now.
Well, yeah, you're talking to me in probably one of the craziest couple of years in what is already like a crazy industry to be working in. And I would just say, the pressure in my world is never ending, whether that be because of the news coverage and the pressure of serving the public, doing the right thing by my company, my employees, the community we're serving, managing the business aspects with that as well, the competitive aspects. So it's different layers all the time, and it's never ending. Some days it leans one way more than the other, but there's always some kind of pressure there, in the heat of the moment pressure, to make those decisions under pressure and under deadlines.
Okay, so you're the news director in some of the most tumultuous times, really, of our lifetime over the past 2 years. Major affiliate, Cox Media in Atlanta. Talk about some of the things maybe that you faced in the last just 18 months.
I came into a situation where there were major behind the scenes business things going on. And I knew as I joined the team in, the mid-19 that we had a big election coming up. And in my mind, everything was going to be about the election. Didn't know that before that we would have all the social injustice things that happening and how the election would unfold and a lot of the things connected to that. George Floyd, Ahmaud Arbery, Breonna Taylor, and being in Atlanta, those were huge stories. And everything that happened in our community connected to those stories. I would say, though, in that, what I didn't expect is the amount of personal growth and growth of people around me in covering those stories and what people started talking about. And add that in and add the fact that the people, even in our newsroom, were finally comfortable in having real conversations and getting behind that. And then the dynamics of going into the election. And, we live in a very divided world. And that's just seen every day in how we cover. And being in the media, as journalists, we were once a profession that everybody respected. And because of the division right now, also, like I'm dealing with, my folks who work for me, who are doing what they do because they are passionate and they believe in serving their communities, but they're also coming under attack. So it's been one thing after another in this past year. I always say, though, the one thing that people don't realize is the people bringing you your local news, they're doing it because they are dedicated to your community. There are many things that they could be doing besides what they're doing. And that commitment I have seen more in the past year and a half and 2 years. And it's why they stay at it every day, is because they are committed. We didn't get to stop. Yeah.
Okay, so Suzanne, I'm so thrilled to talk with you, and there's so much to unpack in what you just said. I was with a group of pastors just recently. These are leaders, that are strong leaders, and yet they're so tired right now. And here's what they were saying to me. They said, Greg, it didn't matter where we landed on political things. It didn't matter where we landed on wearing masks or not in the pandemic. It didn't matter where we landed on racial justice or injustice. We were are under such attack. Suzanne, what advice? How did you walk through that? Because you're saying you were under attack. And just like you, right? You're trying to serve the community.
Right.
That's what these pastors were doing. And yet they're getting blistered by people that supposedly love them and part of the body of Christ.
Yeah, it's hard. And that's where I would say what got me through and what I encourage my folks to do is you do have to, and I understand, I grew up in a preacher's, as a preacher's kid. I understand the unplugging is very difficult, but you do have to find some unplug time. I scheduled my managers and myself, especially at the height of the pandemic and everything, just one day. You have to have that person that you can appoint. You have to have a little bit of unplug time to be able to be there. Many of us are big believers in servant leadership, but to be able to serve the people you are leading, you've got to take some kind of break. And you got to schedule that. You've got to figure that out. And, balance is also a controversial word, but you have to have something besides what it is you're leading to fill up and figure out what that is.
Man, that's good. Suzanne, how much of this do you bring home?
It depends. Now, I am married to someone in the business, so it is, I do bring some, but I still would not be doing this. Janie, a mutual friend of ours, once said to me, she's like, they say that men are the ones with waffle brains and women with spaghetti brains. And I have a feeling that you have a little bit of a waffle brain. And I do probably have I do compartmentalize a lot. I could not still be doing what I'm doing if I wasn't able to compartmentalize. And there are very few stories and things that I bring home. The leading the people I bring home probably more than anything. But I've had to figure out how to take care of myself, how to set aside the starting the day with journaling, reading, or the day is just going to spiral. If I don't start right, the day will not end right.
Oh, that's brilliant. If I don't start right, it's all going to go to pieces. And so, Suzanne, as you're walking through this, you're getting these emails, all of this stuff. That's not going to go away. I mean, the stuff, it's just, we're still in the midst of it and still unpacking all of this. How do you deal with just the text? Well, probably not so much text unless they have your personal number, but the emails. Are you reading them? How much credibility do you give them? Speak into that a little bit to our leaders that are listening.
I say, especially on controversial topics, and being in a media organization where we are determined to still be in the middle. While, people think people are taking one side or not, we are committed to being in the middle. And I always say, if I'm getting stuff on both sides, I know we're probably in the middle. And I look for that, if I'm getting stuff from other side. I will say that it's interesting. Some of the harshest emails I get are from people who preface in the email that they are people of faith. And that is just something over time I've really had to unpack myself, on what it is that they're doing and what they're hiding behind. And the fact, I think you have to keep in mind, whether it be social media or emails, people say things they wouldn't say to your face. I mean, there is a lack of eye contact. The worst of people comes out in electronic communication. And I think you also have to keep that in mind as well. Like, what face-to-face constructive conversation would we be having if you weren't hiding behind a keyboard?
Okay, and do you ever pick up the phone or set up a Zoom call? Or
I do. Well, I have, a great boss who really has taken pride in, that's customer service. It is. I do try to respond to everything I get. When someone starts cursing at me or crossing a line, then we're not productive and I'm not going to be yelled at. It's as long as we're having a productive conversation. But I do. I do return calls. We do return emails, and that's customer service, and that's letting people know that they're heard. And I've realized a lot of missteps I've made over the years from those conversations. Good things can come from those conversations.
Wow. That's a great posture to have, the learning posture. Okay, you mentioned just a few minutes ago about one of the things you appreciated most over the last months was how much you were growing personally and how much you saw growth in the team that you lead. Talk about that. What was going on there with the growth thing?
I was unaware of how uncomfortable so many people were at voicing how they really felt. And again, I have some great leaders, ahead of me and who, support me as well. And I was just very unaware of the things I was unaware of. And I've had to just in awareness and be willing to be uncomfortable myself and lead uncomfortable conversations. And even then not apologize for being uncomfortable, because many people have been uncomfortable for decades and centuries, and we didn't acknowledge that. And that's been a real place of growth. And it's funny because you'll have some people say, oh no, I'm good with being uncomfortable. That's how we're going to grow. We need to get this out in the open. And then we'll have one of those conversations in an editorial and I'll get a phone call and they're like, whoa, that was really uncomfortable. I'm like, yes, that's the point. That's the point. But we have to be. I think I've had to learn to give myself grace because I haven't gotten it right at this point to my life, and I'm still not going to get it right every time, and realize that as long as we're working together on getting it more right and continuing to work and not to get stopped in my tracks when I misstep or someone missteps, and finding those people who are just brutally honest. This is one thing I love about being in Atlanta. It's a diverse community and full of diverse leaders who can just be like, okay, you didn't see this. Let me tell you why you didn't see this. And this is what's really going on. And it's been a lot of aha moments like that.
Okay, so you're in one of these strange fields that in some ways is similar to the pastor. And let me explain. So you're getting that criticism for things that you're publicly saying and putting out there in the news. But also, pastors, one of the hardest things that we do is we always have the weekend coming. It's that train coming down the track. It's that deadline that just keeps coming. You're one of those rare, people that has that same thing, except yours is like daily. You've got these deadlines going. What advice, what have you learned to kind of meet those deadlines, exist in that high pressure situation where the train just keeps coming down the track?
One saying we have in a newsroom is the most important newscast is the next newscast. So in prioritizing, realizing that, and not to hurt something that's further down, that's immediate because of what's going down the road. So realizing we always have something. Another saying we have, and I think this could probably be useful as well, is when something doesn't go right, look at the coolness of the fact that, well, we get to do it again tomorrow. And, there's always another opportunity. There is always, and you know what? That opportunity may be a little more difficult because of a misstep, but you have another opportunity and you get to do it all again. And it's not like anything is sealed up and finished and you can't adjust it in the future. There's always another newscast. And you know what? It's tomorrow.
I appreciate that. And there's always another sermon and there's always another weekend. And, you have, I always think about pastors that are bringing God's word, right? So that's extremely important. I think about newscasters who are bringing, a perspective on the truth. Hopefully it's absolutely the truth is to the best of your knowledge, right? And what a privilege, huh? That you get to do that pastors get to do that. How do you handle that privilege?
It's with great weight. It's with great weight. And it's difficult. One thing that we've worked to handle it in a newsroom and to make sure that we are in truth is what is behind, journalism and what pushes us. But we live in a time where people have different versions of truth or agendas, and how do you convey that? And one thing that newsrooms have done very well, and some organizations have really helped push, is to make sure that your newsroom leadership, especially editorially, is diverse. And diverse in ethnicity, diverse in gender, diverse in thought, diverse in how we go about things. And when you have strong people in a diverse group, you can hear the different things, and people may bring up or yeah, that's what that person's saying, but you know what else is behind it. And I could say some of the biggest missteps in newsrooms that I have been in is whenever we didn't have diversity brought into the discussion. And we're in a point now, and whether it be the Asian spa shootings that we had in, back in January, right. Bringing in our Asian American journalists about, okay, they say this, what is actually feeding that? Is that true? What are we feeding the community if we go along with that? And those are perspectives that I would never think of with good intentions. But unless you bring somebody with that background and that knowledge to the table, you're never going to know. Even with the best of intentions, you will make huge missteps.
This is just so vital, this whole diversity conversation and bringing it to the table. And so that's just a perfect segue, Suzanne. I'm sure. So you grow up in a preacher's household. You become this high impact leader who happens to be a female. Oh, my goodness. What incredible opportunities there must have been for you in the church to use all that gifting. Can you speak into that? And what was it like to grow up in church and then in your church experience so far?
Yeah, so I grew up, and I've heard, folks have said over time, there's, every preacher has at least one kid who has the preacher's gene. And I think in my family, if you would look at the three, it was obviously me. But going into being it wasn't an option. It wasn't, it wasn't discussed. It never occurred to me as an option. At that point, whenever I was making career decisions, I wasn't bitter about it at that point. It's just the way it was. I fell in love with TV news, watching 2020 with my dad. Just the stories they told, the investigations. And I knew I wanted to go in news, probably to actually be on camera at that point, as much as telling stories. But I look at the career path I went. Now, I did start out on camera, but that went into management. And I look at how similar my career path and what my dad actually did, how they are. They're just very, very much the same. But it's interesting as I was finding that way, and as I became more of a leader in the business world, and I was sitting in a church week after week after week, I was getting this growing resentment that it's like, why am I growing in this world and I'm not in this world in the same way? And I'm seeing men walk in and have opportunities just by default that I was never given that opportunity. And I would just say through much of my adulthood, there was this just kind of resentment that the business world, the TV news world fostered me, grew me, found ways for me to lead. And I didn't find it in the church. And it took a while for me to figure out what I needed to do with that and where God wanted me to go with that and what that meant for my future.
Oh, okay. So I'm so obviously your faith was nurtured through your parents and through the church experience, and we're celebrating all of that. And yet there's this heartbreaking story as well. And so I just want you to know, after we finish this recording, we need to have an offline conversation about you being a church planter. So because Stadia does empower women in every aspect of leadership. So that part of your calling life may not be over yet, Suzanne. Okay. Okay, so now, though, you're involved in a Stadia Church plant of all the crazy things in Atlanta, and you're starting to use some of those leadership gifts in your church role.
Definitely. And it's interesting, my last three pastors that, came up through the plants, the two in Pittsburgh and the one here in Atlanta, and it's awesome that I have been called to different leadership roles. And it's here in Atlanta in leading groups, different opportunities in Pittsburgh as well. And it's awesome. It's just great to see. It's great to have the conversations. It's great to see the pivot. It's great to see people who believe like I do starting to accept women in leadership. And I think that's something that I kind of struggled with. It's like I saw where there were other places where I could go in different churches, but maybe theologically and other things I didn't align with them. And I love the fact that people who believe like I do, and a lot of core foundation things are embracing women as well, and in leadership. So it's empowering. It's empowering to be with those women, with those men who are supporting those women. And by the way, those men who take bullets for supporting women. And knowing that when they open that up, the conversations they have with other men in defending the women that they are giving leadership opportunities to.
It's one of our deepest joys is to empower women, and partly because I have these amazing conversations with women like you and church leaders that I learn so much from, and I would be missing that if that, weren't part of our life. But, I want to make sure that our listeners hear this, because we didn't, the empowerment of women at River Tree, where I served as senior pastor for 25 years, we took this very seriously, and we did a 7-year study, Suzanne, on the role of men and women in the Bible. And I'm telling you, we brought speakers in and read theology and all kinds of stuff. And at the end, we landed on ministry is gift-based, not gender-based. And so I guess what I want to make sure our listeners know is we take this very seriously. And it wasn't some cultural decision that we made. Okay, you actually are writing a couple of books right now. I know you're working on them. And I was really intrigued by one of the working titles, what I learned from working in the media that I should have learned from church. Give us just a snapshot, just the glimpse in under the cover.
Yeah, a lot of it are lessons that maybe have been discussed more. And I think they're starting to get discussed. And some of this was I just didn't learn in the church because I didn't have leadership opportunities in the church when I was coming up. And some of it, I think some of them are things that, the church may have this, a little wrong and maybe missing an opportunity here. I would definitely say racial inequity. I would say that is something, and I think a lot of our churches don't get it because we don't have that diversity at the table.
Correct.
And being in a newsroom and in a business where we have focused on diversity, there are a lot of just diversity issues that I've learned in the news that I wish I would have learned in the church, but I didn't. A lot of things just about taking care of yourself, women, helping women. I think we as women sometimes need to step up and get over some of our own insecurities that may be stopping other women from growing, and realizing that, God's call for me and my family may be different than God's calling for you and your family. That doesn't make either of us better or, stronger or weaker in God's eyes. And when we get over that and help each other, then we can really go places.
We'll do another talk about the whole book. Okay, Suzanne, I'm thinking about this, and some leaders, and this is all fine. I get it. If you're a leader and you haven't landed where I landed on the role of men and women, and maybe your church doesn't have women elders, or maybe the preaching pastor, if you will, can't be a woman. But my goodness, there are all kinds of other areas of leadership within the church. Suzanne, what would you say to pastors, regardless of where they land on this issue? Now, I mean, if in the church I grew up in, women, they couldn't teach boys or men over 6th grade. They could prepare communion, but they couldn't serve it. They could play the piano. They couldn't lead singing. So that in my opinion, that was just goofy and such a misfortune. But not too many churches are there these days. Let's go to the next step. Those that, are empowering of women, but maybe just biblically aren't ready to have them as the senior leader or so. Speak to those pastors.
I read this the other day and this spoke to me. There is a difference between permitting and pursuing. So you may be permitting, but are you pursuing women in leadership as much as you're pursuing men? And I think that's a question that male leaders in churches really need to ponder. I can't take credit for that. I read it somewhere, but I love it. It's one step to permit. It's another bolder step to pursue. And then if you're in the land, I think where, you don't want women leading men, and you've got strong women who are okay with that and are looking on where they can really make a difference, have them invest their time in leading girls and young women and college women. Like they need to see other strong women and really just pouring into them, being their mentors. That is a place where I think it's just, especially anything that's 17 to 25, and you're trying to figure out where you are, maybe all the way up to 30. It's until that thing in the brain, where you make more mature decisions. I think we're really focused on high school, but then there's that period after high school where I think we could really pour into our young adult women.
So, Suzanne, I know you were asked to be an elder before you just moved into Atlanta a while back, but I know that from our friend Janie, and so you weren't able to take that position. So what I would say is to leaders out there, if you're gift-based, make sure you get these women like Suzanne and all those godly voices at the table, right? Okay. And if you're not quite there yet, and that's fine, or you never will be, make sure you're encouraging and pursuing women into leadership roles where they really can have influence, because you can hear the wisdom of Suzanne and what she brings to the table. Okay, Suzanne, our time's about up. I have 3 questions I always close with. Here's number 1. What do you wish pastors would do more of?
Oh, I kind of just said it. Pursue.
Okay. Fantastic. Question 2. What do you wish pastors would do less of?
Ooh, I've seen this at so many churches as I've moved in 8 cities. Watch don't dwell on the past so much. Our history and everything is big. But as you've got new people coming into your church, or I would just say this, if you're leading an organization, it's while your history is important, while that core is important, don't get so caught up and cliquish that you're off-putting to the new people coming in.
Wow. Okay, and number 3, what has been one thing that a pastor has done that has been especially helpful to you?
Pursued me.
It just reflects the heart of God, Suzanne. What does God do? He pursues you, pursues me. And
right.
That's what we're called to do as well. Suzanne Nadell, thank you for being with us on the Church Planting Podcast. I can't wait to talk with you again in the growth of our friendship.
Thank you for having me. I enjoy this.